Welcome to another episode of The Modern Hotelier. We're excited to release this episode with Ben Webster, GM of Hotel Marcel. David, what were some of your highlights of this episode?
Well, I think it was great because Ben really deciphered what it truly means to be sustainable. And we both love independent hotels. So just the whole story of how they're not only an independent hotel, but how they work with the community to continue to be the only true sustainable hotel. I thought that was amazing.
Absolutely. First all-electric, solar-powered, LEED Platinum certified, fossil fuel-free hotel in the U.S., the first and only one. He had great tips for any hoteliers that are looking to be more sustainable. Just overall great conversation. He's been a GM for 11 years, so he knows the ropes, but really a great episode. I'm excited for everybody to listen. Enjoy.
Welcome to The Modern Hotelier, hospitality's most engaged podcast. I'm David Malilly.
I'm Steve Karen.
And I'm John Boomhofer.
Steve, who do we have on the program today?
David, today we have on Ben Webster. Ben is the GM of Hotel Marcel. Ben has 23 years of experience in luxury independent hotels, with 11 of that being a GM in hotels around the U.S. Hotel Marcel stands as a testament to the seamless integration of historic preservation and modern sustainability, offering guests an eco-conscious stay without compromising on a comfort or style level. Thanks for joining us, Ben.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, so Ben, we're going to go through a couple areas. We're going to go through a lightning round. We're going to get to know you a little bit better, where you grew up, your career, and then we're going to get into some industry questions. Sound good?
Sounds good.
What's something that you wish you were better at?
Spending more time with my 4-month-old.
What's the most used app on your phone?
Gmail.
All right. What's a luxury you cannot live without?
Well, I don't lead a very luxurious lifestyle. I am very tall, though, so I would say extra legroom on planes.
If you could trade places with anyone for a day, who would you trade places with?
My wife, to see what it's like to live with me.
What's the best piece of advice you've received?
Best piece of advice. Give the company its money's worth.
Got it. All right. And what's your favorite city and why?
Well, I don't like the cities. I like to be out in the country if I can. Don't have one.
All right. Yeah, good answer.
That's great. That's great, Ben. Great. So now we're going to dive into a little bit
That's
more
the
about your
toughest part of
background.
this.
Yeah. The rest is easy street. You're good. You're good on this. So you grew up in Southbury, Connecticut. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's true.
How did that shape you into who you are today?
Well, that's a good question. I think I grew up in a family that my father was a mechanic. My mother worked at the library, kind of blue collar family. And I ended up, when I was 16 years old, going to work at a hotel. My brother and I passed each other on the road one day, and he said, "We need extra valets at this hotel. Go home, change your clothes, and you're going to go work at a hotel." And that was Connecticut's only 5-star, 5-diamond hotel at that point in time. It exposed me to a world maybe I never had exposure to. ADRs, near $1,000 sort of thing. That wasn't a lifestyle I ever understood. So I think growing up in that area, I had a good mix of, real world and what maybe some of that luxury hospitality world could be, and finding the blend between the two was awesome. And I think that mindset's kind of carried with me throughout my career.
And you went to Eastern Connecticut State University. You got your degree in business administration and management. How did you end up at Eastern Connecticut?
I wanted to go to school for business. I liked the smaller school. I got into, UConn and some of the bigger Connecticut ones, like a lot of my friends all went off to. But, I liked the smaller feel of the school. And, I was a distance runner, like the smaller team feel sort of thing. And it was far enough away from home without being too far from home, and certainly in-state tuition's friendly. So that was a nice thing to do too. Yeah. But yeah, I really enjoyed my time there and was able to kind of work my way through college as well, working at a hotel the whole time.
Very nice. So you mentioned you're a distance runner. You were in cross country and track and field, high school, college. What were some of your favorite events that you got to participate in?
Well, cross country, I think, was being out in the woods running was always a good feeling. I think you challenge yourself as an individual in distance running, but it doesn't work unless you have the support of the team. And while you're still competing to a team, it's not like someone's passing you the ball sort of thing. I'm a glutton for punishment, I guess. Distance running is most people's torture, and it's what we thrived on. So I think that's just my personality. I enjoyed the distance running. I enjoyed the discipline needed for it. The time out in the woods was always good, but it was definitely probably a tighter team because it's usually a smaller team or a smaller group of people, and I enjoyed that.
Sure. That makes sense. I'm one of those people. I'm not a running distance.
These are good questions. These are good questions. All right.
Kind of guy. Well, good. So now that we got to know a little bit more about you, we're going to go how you got to where you are and kind of go through your career. So like you mentioned before, you started packing bags and parking cars and worked your way up to assistant GM at the Mayflower Inn and Spa in Connecticut. Is that where you fell in love with hotels, or can you tell us a little bit more about how you kind of got that itch for hotels?
Yeah, I'll give a shout out, I think, to my former mentor and GM. Right, I think you learn to love the industry or love a business that you're with because of the leadership that's there. Right, and that property, I love the exposure. I love the incredible people that just came through that property that you get to meet. I think I fell in love with that part of hotels, and at that intimate, very independent, 30-room property, everything's very relationship based instead of transactional, right? It was about actually delivering the highest level of hospitality and really getting to know individuals as to who they are and what they care about and what their families are like. We had a leadership team that was there. I think the 7 or 8 EC members had 150 years experience at that property. It was very familial. And I think that's a part of hospitality that I really enjoy. And you don't see that in so many other industries. I could have walked into a room in that. I realized, I think at an early age in my teenagers, early 20s when I was there, that I could walk into a room and be surrounded by an incredible, James Beard winning chef, someone who knew accounting, a massage therapist, a housekeeper, college age kids, people in their 60s, it was, different ages and races and sexual orientations. It's the most diverse group of people you'd ever find in any business, all working towards one goal. And I think that's what I really fell in love with about hospitality. And any other industry I look at, you don't see anything that deep, right? So I think that little property helped shape that perspective for me. And that was something I've always appreciated and part of what I fell in love with this industry.
That's great. And so you've been GM of hotels in Connecticut, Nashville, Colorado. What did you learn from being a GM of hotels around the country?
Yeah, so my most recent company I'm with, Charlestown Hotels, that's the management company here at Hotel Marcel. I've been with CH for almost 7.5, 8 years now, in 5 different states, some task force, some permanent. You learn a lot, right? I think everything in this world is about perspective. And I was in Greenville, South Carolina at one point in time, and Nashville. So being in the South and then going out to Denver, and I spent time in Fort Lauderdale, Stowe, Vermont. Some things about hospitality are just consistent, regardless of location. But I think the employees, some of the guest needs, they change by location, and I think that's just a great perspective of what the staff valued maybe when I was in Greenville versus what they valued when I was in Colorado versus what their needs are here in Connecticut are very different. So always being in tune with that is important. And the types of properties have been a little different. So the guests have different expectations at certain properties. But, all in all, I think hospitality is one of the most universal languages. There's so many themes. The core competencies of what guests are looking for stay the same regardless of location and type of property, which make it easy to do those transitions.
And it's actually funny. This is how small of a world hospitality is and how kind of our paths crossed. I actually stayed in the property, your origin, outside of Denver, Colorado, while you were the GM of that property. I actually was a guest there.
Did we meet before? Did we meet? I don't know.
We didn't meet. All right. I was at that property, and it really stuck out to me because I loved how kind of the Red Rocks culture was into the hotel, and I traveled with my pets a lot, so it was extremely dog friendly as well. So just a couple of things that stuck out. It was a really cool property and awesome stay.
I have a guest. I remember when I was in Greenville, South Carolina, I was reading over the list of arrivals that day, and it's like, man, that name is familiar. Sure enough, they stayed with me when I was a GM in Connecticut, or I was an AGM in Connecticut. Then I'm out in Nashville and I'm reading through the list of arrivals that day. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Same guest stayed there too. And it's like, are you following me? But it's, I was attracted to those independent, type of properties. That's what they like to stay at. I think we all stay engaged in who's in our building at that every day. So yeah, I've had the same guest in probably three or four of my hotels across my career, which is just pretty incredible.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, now you're the GM of Hotel Marcel. Hotel Marcel is probably one of the most unique properties that we've had on this podcast and that actually I've ever heard of. You're the first all-electric, solar-powered, LEED platinum certified, fossil fuel-free hotel in the United States. What made sustainability such a priority at Hotel Marcel?
It's a mouthful, isn't it? Yeah.
It is.
We're one of one here.
I practiced like four times before this.
Yeah, the accolades and certifications and those sorts of things we've been able to get, and the only passive house hotel in the U.S. and the largest in the world. Let's not forget that one, I guess. Where did it come from? It started with our ownership. A lot of independent hotels. We are part of the Hilton Tapestry Collection, but we're very independently minded. Bruce Becker is a gentleman. He's him and his wife Kramer. They are Becker Associates. They've done residential buildings and that sort of thing. But they ended up getting this old building, this old cool Brulos building from 1969 that's been empty for 20 years. And they were going to, it was going to be leveled. And as a passionate architect, he was like, no way. So he takes over, saves the building, doesn't know anything about hotels, but he has a passion to fight the climate crisis. And he said, let's just make an incredibly sustainable hotel. I want to do it zero emissions. What I don't think you realized during that process was it's never been done before. So We are who we are. I teased Bruce all the time. I said, we're who we are because he didn't know any better.
Right.
So he just had it. It's amazing what happens when you have a commitment to something, right? So, and his commitment was no fossil fuels in this building. Was that an easy task? No, particularly doing it in the middle of a pandemic. He bought the building a couple months right before the pandemic started, 3 months before the pandemic started. So it was a fun pandemic project. Let's start the only zero emission hotel in the U.S. But he did it out of passion, right? As of a commitment to say, we don't want to have any emissions, just zero emissions. And ultimately, I think he's a visionary because that's, you look at public policy now in certain cities, Boston, New York, that sort of thing. You're not allowed to have fossil fuels in new buildings as they're being developed if they're over a certain square footage. And every building in Massachusetts now of certain size has to be passive house required, that sort of stuff. So, I think there are a lot of phone calls and other, hotel management companies, developers. We're a Hilton affiliate hotel, but we have every other brand has come through this property to say, what are you doing? Because they understand it is the future. So we're in a historic building, but definitely the future of travel. It started just off of a commitment.
That's great. And you've been open a bit over 2 years now. How do you continue to explore sustainability options?
So the first and foremost, what makes us, I think, the most sustainable hotel is the building itself, right? Is that what Bruce did during construction, the actual build out. So the physical entity, checking off a lot of those boxes and things that you just talked about, that's what's made us zero emission hotel. What we get to do as the operator, myself, my leadership team here, Charleston Hotels is the management company. We challenge each other. Bruce challenges us. We challenge Bruce. We work together as a group to say, what else can we do? So we look at it from how we're sourcing products, how we're getting deliveries in just to reduce, the scope 3 emissions, offer free EV charging to our staff members to entice them to do better and pull off their reliance on fossil fuels. I think every decision we make, every touch point for the guests, is there an opportunity to reduce not just emissions, but, single-use plastics, our BLDG restaurant and our executive chef, Megan Gill, how we're sourcing our food. We donate all of our food waste off to, Havens Harvest and some of those local food rescue opportunities. It's just in our ethos of the bill. It's in our mission to say every decision we make, how do we do this in a manner that's reducing our impact? And I don't think it's as complicated as people think. It's just, you have to prioritize it. And we've also found it not to be that much more expensive, right? And some things are actually less expensive. And we've seen it welcomed by the guest.
That's great. So now what we're going to do is go into more of the industry thoughts and best practices. And you can imagine it's focused around sustainability. So Hotel Marcel, you've really been a pioneer. Like you said, first of its kind. What advice do you have for hotels that are looking to be a little bit more sustainable, and how can they best put that into action?
It starts with your decision making. And you have to go to the why, right? I think you need a commitment from the ownership, you need a commitment from the management company, you need a commitment from the brand if you're brand affiliated. Everybody has to agree as to what you're doing. And I think that's why we've been so successful here. There's a lot of talk, right? I think this industry has a lot of greenwashing in it. The US is behind the curve, I think. Most of the initiatives we brought in, and some even the technologies in the building, we were the first of our kind bringing them in from Europe, whether it was our Mitsubishi Heat 2.0 domestic hot water system, whether it was, we were the first six of the first 7 commercial heat pump dryers that we brought in. The primary goal that we did, and I think it's good for every building or business, or if you're in a PIP or you have to make some CapEx, can you electrify that? Can you electrify it? Can you do it without gas? Our kitchen, fully induction, right? Some people say that's crazy. I have a 77-seat restaurant. We can host events for 300 people here. We can do it all out of an induction kitchen. So if people have questions or how do you do it, come and see me, right? Come and see me and Bruce. We'll walk you through the building. We'll talk about how it exists. But it starts with, I think, the commitment. The technology curve has caught up lately. Probably the biggest questions and pushback we get from people who are interested in it, but they're skeptical, or like, how do you do it? It's a math game, right? And I think, I'll always go back and say hospitality kind of started to die off 15, 20 years ago, right? It became not about, actual engagement and hospitality and taking care of guests. It became about the deal, right? It was about the real estate deal. And that's painful for the industry. And a lot of the questions we get are from owners and developers who are like, well, how much more did it cost? What was that out there? And what we've proven now, 2.5 years in, right now we have some data to actually go up and back this up, is I spend $250,000 less a year than I would if this was a traditional fueled building. Certain states have great incentives. Bruce would tell you he put in less capital into the building because of, some of the ways we could do our lighting and drapes was a little less actually than maybe a traditional system. And with the cost of rising utilities, maybe some of the items that were more expensive that maybe had a 10, 12-year return, we've chopped that to like 4 years because in Connecticut, the electricity rates doubled, right? Well, we're making our own. So that math turns out in our favor. But it starts with a commitment. Bruce is committed to this building and seeing it through for a while. And if we want to see a shift in the industry, we need owners maybe who aren't looking to sell their hotel in the next 10 months, right? I remember when I was in Nashville, I think every hotel that opened sold in the first 3 years. Some of them sold the opening day, right? I don't remember which one it was, but one of the big ones that developed and opened, I think in 2019 or 2020, they sold an hour and a half after they opened their doors. So it was never about hospitality. It was about the deal. So let's find, if we want to find ways to increase our sustainability within the industry. Before it was scary because it was impacting the deal so much. But now we found ways in here, and Bruce is what he's kind of calculated, and what after being open 2 years, we've seen in our monthly P&Ls, that time is shortened, and it is actually worth the investment in the building ahead of time. So I think that's probably one of the biggest takeaways that we've seen from what was stopping other people to do it was the financials. And now we have some math that says, I have extra cash flow to help pay the mortgage because I'm spending a third of what a normal utility expense may be at a hotel. I think as management companies and operators, we fight rising labor costs, rising cost of goods, those sorts of things. How many people are really looking at their utilities, and what upgrades can you make to your building where that extra money I'm saving on utilities, we get to maybe have an extra employee or do something to invest in our team members or do something to invest in the guest experience. Nobody ever looks at that line as detailed as they do as their labor or their cost of goods, that sort of thing.
Right.
We look at that. And I think we've found some solutions that help move that forward. So as an industry trend and, what's part of the the restrictions there. That's definitely something that I think we've been proud of, and that's something we continue to work on. We're not done yet, right? We're still a laboratory. How can we continue to tweak our energy usage, or maybe find ways to add more? It never ends. It keeps going.
Well, you kind of read our minds, because that was pretty much the next question, but I'll tweak it. So, last year I was at a couple events and that's okay. It was on a couple. It was good stuff. It was, and I went to watched a couple panels, and cost was always brought up, just like you said. It was always kind of this in the greenwashing and everything. So I guess the kind of takeaway from everything you just said, is there one main thing, like if a hotel was trying to go be more sustainable, is there one main area to focus that really is, the cost is worth the savings long term?
Yeah, I think so. When we use the word sustainable, I think that's a very vague term, not only in our industry, but across the board, right? What does sustainable even mean, right? You can say, oh, this is a sustainable hotel. This is a sustainable business, most sustainable business. What does it mean, right? So that definition to us is about decarbonization. I think if you look at a lot of experts and you follow the data, the word sustainability is really about how do we reduce emissions, right? And so the decarbonization element, that just starts by electrifying things and just pulling our use off of fossil fuels. And I think that's where the biggest maybe investment goes, but that's also where there's probably now the most incentives, and also where you see the fastest return is on those elements now, when just putting in the physical systems in the building to make your building more efficient. But also, we look at like our windows here, just the way we built the building and re-energize the building. We're able to do it in a manner that's, different systems, whether it's domestic hot water, kitchen, laundry, lighting, find systems that can do it at 30% of traditional systems energy use. So then it makes the energy you do have, that much more efficient. So it goes a little further. It's not a big investment to do those things, but it depends how you define sustainability, right? The big one, is about just decarbonization in general. And there's a lot of gray area out there right now in the industry about what does sustainability even mean. We like to try to educate the way we think is true about what does it mean to be sustainable and decarbonization. There's a lot of businesses that say they're going to be net zero. There's carbon neutral. There's even hotels now say they're carbon positive, right? What does that mean, right? That can be confusing, but we don't have a gas line to the building. We don't burn any. We don't have to do through offsets or, how many trees are we planting, that sort of thing. You can do it without any in the first place, right? And then you don't have to worry about some of that math. And I think the education of the guest and how they book through, whether it's through a brand app or through an OTA, there's a lot there too. I think that as an industry, we're still evolving to help make that clear to what the guests are, like what they're looking for. That's what I'm excited about.
Absolutely. So one of the things I'm sure guests that stay with you are focused on sustainability. That's one of the reasons they want to come stay at Hotel Marcel. Is there a way for guests almost to get involved while they stay with you to almost help Hotel Marcel be more sustainable?
Great question. Yeah, who stays here too, right? So I do think, first and foremost, we're just a good hotel, right? Like, I have a lot of guests who come, they don't know the difference. We're not forcing anything down their throat. They don't have to sacrifice quality of any type, right? But there's definitely a good percentage of our guests who are staying here because they have a choice of where they stay, and they're making a choice because it aligns with their values, right? How can they get involved? Ask questions. I think that's the biggest part, because there's still that educational piece of like, how does it work within the industry? My team and myself are we're accessible. Come and talk to us. We launched some things like the climate change wake-up call. So there's a phone in our lobby you pick up, and they can hear fun facts about, well, that's not necessarily fun. There's some of them are maybe a little scary. Facts about climate change, those sorts of things.
Right.
Go to our website, read through how we're doing it, that sort of thing. But I think just keep asking questions. When you're booking, maybe a little education. Understand what it means to be zero emission versus carbon neutral, that sort of thing, and help let that form your opinion. I think that's the biggest way. I didn't know anything about it till I got here, right? And I asked a lot of questions, and Yeah, I'm a hotelier first and foremost. I don't know anything about. I didn't know I might need a minor in electrical engineering and you know, some of these environmental sustainability things. But we get here, and I ask a lot of questions because it's cool too. I think my staff are engaged, probably even more so than guests that are curious and ask questions. We see it when we have applicants come in. We see people are passionate about it. It's probably helped me hiring. I think I'm probably one of the fortunate hotels in New Haven who could say they're fully staffed because I have people who are interested. They ask the right questions. They want to be part of a solution.
So this is kind of piggybacking off an earlier question, but what trends are you seeing in sustainability in 2025 or, just moving forward in the future?
I think the trend I'm most seeing is really coming about understanding, right? About clarity within, you see it from the OTAs. They're trying to figure out how do we position what sustainable hotels mean because it's coming, right? I'm one of one right now. Maybe in the next couple of years, we're one of 10. In 10 years, maybe we're one of 50 as the only zero emission hotels. I think that the brands have figured out like, hey, we got to prioritize this. We have to talk about this. We need to find ways to get more of these in our portfolios. I think the OTAs have realized we've putting green leafs on properties to say they're sustainable, but nobody really knows what that means. We need to clarify that. We need some form of industry standard, right? And there's great organizations that are helping standardize that. There's a lot of third-party certifications now because maybe an OTA knows they're not the best people to certify that, right? So as an Audubon or a Green Key or some of these other third-party certifications that you can come through where there's a little more understanding of consistency, right, of what it means when they do those things. So I think that's a trend we're just in the beginning of. I think the next couple, hopefully 5 years or so, we're going to see some more movement in that direction. You'll probably see the U.S. start to adopt some of those European standards and metrics that they're having for classifying what sustainability means consistently.
And one thing before we move on to the next section here, before we launched, you're telling me about the wall and the wood behind you. It seems like you and the owner have just created this amazing culture at Hotel Marcel. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that wood got picked out?
So, we're a historic building, right? So first and foremost, the building, right, being built in 1969 is this old brutalist concrete building. The best thing we repurposed and recycled was all the embodied carbon within the building, right, which is usually one of the larger carbon impacts you have is that embodied carbon. The building had so many cool old things in it. The light fixture above my head has been in this building for 50 years. The wood paneling was picked out by I'm in one of our suites, and they have this cool original paneling that was the executive offices, and each executive got to pick out the wood they wanted for their paneling, which is really cool. So we preserved a lot of these items because we're also listed on the National Registry of Historic Places. So not only are we kind of a hotel of the future from our zero emission and in sustainability model, we've done it in an old building, which is cool. So we're a bit of where kind of old meets new. And I like to think of that culturally as to how my staff and maybe we deliver guest experience. I kind of want that old world hospitality, high level of engagement, not necessarily, we don't want anything stuffy or pretentious. We just want something that's engaging, right? You feel comfortable when you come in. The staff are engaging. They show care that you should in hospitality. But we're doing it in a manner that is making decisions from the business about the environment, right? So not only do we want to be engaged with the guests, we're engaged with each other. We want to be engaged with the community and the local region, how we source our food, that sort of thing. We're also engaged in the global climate crisis and how we're delivering our building, right? So I think it's a kind of a weird dichotomy of that old meets new within the building, and I kind of look at that from our culture as well, and I like to think it's working. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So this whole time, we've been the one asking you questions, and you've done a great job answering it. But this is where we're going to turn the tables, and we're going to let you ask David and I a question.
Well, how come you haven't come to see me at Hotel Marcel yet? I guess it'll be my short question.
I think my invitation got lost in the mail.
Yeah, me too.
But as soon as I get it, I'd love to see it. I was kind of talking to David about the property before this, and it's just incredible what you guys are doing. I mean, to be 101 in the country, really focusing on sustainability, I'll use that loose term, but really kind of leading the the forefront of this initiative. So thank you for doing this. And it seems like you guys are doing an absolutely incredible job.
We're getting there, and one of the things, I'll have a good question for you. Actually, I think you caught me off guard on that one. So I think the real question I would ask you, because you guys are so engaged, you guys talk to every level of decision makers within hospitality, obviously GMs to owners. One of the things I think we have, maybe I don't engage so much as to the level you do. We have so many Fortune 500 companies who have all these, nationally, there's so many companies who have these great sustainability messages. We want them to be able to live their message. Many of them have these decarbonization goals, right? When it comes to the people who are planning the meetings and the events, the folks that you talk to, whether they're GMs, they're, with the brands, industry professionals, when these groups and meeting planners want to make the decision of where are we hosting our events, right? I have 9,000 square feet of meeting space. I host events for up to 300 people. You would think that those who have it as part of their mission would like to come and host them at a place like us. But there's a disconnect there between what these companies say they want versus how it goes through the planning and meeting cycle process, right? To who's actually signing the decision. So when you talk to a lot of people, in your experience, what do you think people are actually prioritizing when they are booking their large meetings or events? The consumers, when you talk to them, right? And you're saying, when you're choosing locations, how do you actually do it versus when do you actually, the person who's signing the contract versus what it says on their website is very different. There's a disconnect there. I want to challenge those Fortune 500 companies to live their message, right? Do you see this? Maybe it's not even sustainability, but just these companies say one thing, how they're booking their events and meetings are another. Have you run into that in the history of this podcast or your experiences?
I mean, my experience is that, and I think what you're getting at is a lot of people just, they kind of BS their way or say what they think people want to hear. And then they don't really act that way. They don't really care. They say they care, but they don't do anything. And I think that's part of the challenges right now. The people I think who are running a lot of these events aren't necessarily like worried about sustainability or they're worried about location and cost and things of that nature. And then I think it's also what you hit on several times. It's also choice. Like how many, like you said, how many like really viable sustainability like hotels that really care about it are there? So I think a lot of people are kind of like, well, if the hotel itself doesn't care about it, why should I care about it? That mentality, and then they just go on with their life.
Yeah, David, I agree with you. I feel like I agree with you on most of these questions, but yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I think it's, maybe it's sustainable. They say they're sustainable. It's kind of like those hotels that say, oh, this is a sustainable hotel. And then you walk in, there's individual shampoo, conditioner bottles and things like that. And it's like, well, I don't know how that's sustainable, but it's kind of not really that top priority. They're more thinking, oh, where can we go that's going to be sexy? Where are we going to go where guests are going to come? And it's like, oh, this is fantastic. So we end up in Orlando or Vegas or something like that, where it's kind of these more traditional places, but they're not really focused on, okay, we're bringing thousands of people in here. Think of all the emissions just from travel, right? Not really bringing sustainability to the forefront of mind, which I hope we see a shift in the near future, because your hotel should be one of the hotels with great meeting space, sustainable. You should be on the top of the list for any event planners.
Yeah. And there's just that disconnect, I think, between event planners, whether it's the planning organizations, the travel agents, whatever it may be. I always use the example, you can, whether you're Boston, New York, Philly, DC, whatever, mid-Atlantic to New England, you can get on an electric train, come here, we'll pick you up in an electric shuttle, host your whole event here in a building with zero emissions, and leave. You can host a 200 person normal event with higher quality food and services, and you've consumed no fossil fuels. That's what they say they want, right? And it exists, but we're one of one, right? So I think that's what I'm excited about for the future. But the question I still have, and I think my team and our sales and marketing team is, how do we really continue to get that message out? And I thank you for having me here to talk about it. Maybe this helps get that message out a little bit.
That's what I'm saying. Event planners, go look at Hotel Marcel. Let's be sustainable.
That's right.
Let's do it.
Come and see me. Yeah.
There you go. So Ben, our producer, John, he's been listening in the background the whole time. We're going to let him ask one more question, and then we're going to get you out of here.
So I don't know if you said this throughout the episode, but listening to you talk about it, to me, I was drawing the line between or drawing the theme, connecting the dots between like the sustainability and a localized experience. Like Steve and David talk about how hyper local experiences are becoming so big. And it just seems to me that focusing on sustainability means you have to be more local. And I'm curious what your experience is with how what you guys have done has really tied you into the community or the location and the community around you.
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I mentioned we were opening this building in the middle of a pandemic, so we had to source differently. And just the way that ownership had sourced a lot of our case goods, I mean, literally the table that's underneath me and the bed frames and things like that we have here. If we were to order those through traditional methods, they're getting shipped from Turkey or something like that. And I don't know if this hotel still would have been open at that point in time. But there are local opportunities. We were able to get them from between that and some of our window surrounds, these companies just within, over the border in New York, one up in Torrington, Connecticut, a lot less emissions. We got them faster. We got them cheaper, right? It all kind of worked out in our favor. You just have to be willing to source differently. You have to be willing to source outside of the traditional hotel FF&E methods, right? So I think that's one fold there, right? I think just be willing to source a little differently. That does carry over into operations as well for us. When we're thinking about the dog treats that we serve to the guests, right? If Steve comes and stays with us and brings his dog with him, the dog treats we have aren't getting shipped out of St. Louis and coming to us here. No, we make them in-house in the kitchen, right? When we source with leftover food scraps, right? There's no waste. It's just sourcing our food, which, tends to be a huge emissions buster. And they're coming from farms that maybe aren't as ethical. Chef Megan gets out to the farms here, sees how they're raising the animals or growing their food. How is it getting shipped to us? To even how we clean some of our streets and those sorts of things. We look for people who use electric snow blowers and that sort of stuff to help us clean our streets up. But when it gets to the guest experience, we have EV bikes to get you down into New Haven, right? So you can go visit, the libraries at Yale or whatever it may be here in town. We also have a lot of partners, right? I think education and sustainability is important for us. Where our compost goes off to the local farm, and we get some of our animals from that farm. So it's very circular. I think the more you can shrink the radius of where your vendors come from, whether it's through food and beverage or whether it's coming from soaps in your room, whatever it may be, if you could shrink that radius, you're innately just shrinking those Scope 3 emissions, and maybe you don't even know it, but you're also supporting the local economy, right? You come and have dinner here in New Haven. The meat came from Old Lyme, just down the road from us, right? So not only are you helping the local economy, you're helping usually smaller businesses too in that world. And I would challenge anybody to say that I am paying more for those products than I would be if I was doing it differently, right? My cost of goods and those sort of percentages are industry standard, if not better. So I'm not paying more for it, but I think the guest sees that, feels it, appreciates it for sure. It just starts by looking and asking the questions. It's homework.
Well, that does it for another episode of The Modern Hotelier. Ben, please let people know how they can either connect with you and find out more information about the hotel.
Yeah, I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. Certainly go to Hotel Marcel. You can find us there. Go to our website. Shoot me an email, bwebster@hotelmarcel.com. Go ahead and get ahead of me. We're happy to get people here to the hotel, share stories, industry, things we've run into. It hasn't been all easy, that's for sure. We've done some of the hard challenges to get to this point, and we're happy to maybe see some more zero emission hotels come down the line here in the next couple of years.
That's great. Well, that does it for another episode of The Modern Hotelier, hospitality's most engaged podcast. Whether you're watching or listening, we appreciate you and hope to see you again soon. And thank you for being on the program, Ben.
Thanks for having me, gentlemen.
You made it to the end of The Modern Hotelier. Thanks for watching or listening. The Modern Hotelier is produced by Modern Hotelier Media. Make sure to like and subscribe if you're listening on YouTube, or subscribe wherever you get your podcast. If you know a good guest, sponsor, or have media needs, feel free to reach out to us at hello@themodernhotelier.com. Thanks and have a great day.